All right, everyone, welcome to our first ever Grace Pointe Snow Day special, we're going to call it. And as we are recording this, there's no snow. We're recording it early, but as you're watching this, there should be loads of snow on the ground. So anyway, it's a crazy weekend here in Southwest Missouri. As always, we go through kind of a lovely November. December's not too bad. We're like, oh, it's just not even going to snow this whole year. It's going to be awesome. And then here it comes. So, all right, before we get into it today, it's going to be a special day. We have 4 different live stream segments. We're going to have Sunday School with Pastor Rachel, Sunday School with Dr. R.B. Maynard. We're going to have a GP Kids with Pastor Justin, and then a little message from myself. Before we get into that, I have 3 things I want to cover that are very important. Number 1 is hopefully the snow might still be here, but it's going to be conducive enough to have our first ever, not our first ever, but we're going to have our Dream Conference Saturday, January 31st at 6 p.m. This is a one-night event for men and women. It's a night of inspiration, a night of worship. We have guest speakers, Carl and Maribel Miller, that are going to be with us. They're U.S. missionaries. So just an overall night of fun. It's a free event. There's childcare. So please come check that out. Our Dream Conference. We're designing this just for you, women and men. It's going to be a great night. Secondly, gracepointeag.org. That's our website. We don't like to skip church, but when we do, we have to understand we still got to pay the bills and all those kind of things. So I just encourage you, you can give your tithes and offerings online, gracepointeag.org. You can send it in the mail. You can stop in the office later on this week when it's safer or better if you want to do it that way or whatever. But just keep in mind your giving to missions, your tithes and offerings to the church. Please do that. And then thirdly, we were going to have our annual business meeting today, but that's canceled as well. We're going to have it 2 weeks from now on Sunday, February 8th. Why? Because next week is going to be our Dream Conference on Saturday, but also those speakers, Carl and Maribel Miller, are going to be with us in our Sunday AM service. So we might have revival. Who knows? We're going to let them do whatever God wants to do, and we don't want to rush them. So we'll have it 2 weeks from now. There you go. Please pay attention to those 3 items. God bless you guys. Well, we are going to slide into, if you don't know, we have some excellent teachers at Grace Pointe, one of which is Master Pastor Rachel Johnson, that is now, and one Dr. R.B. Maynard. So Dr. R.B. Maynard, hello, sir.
Hello.
We used to do podcasts together back in the day.
Yes, we did.
And then I don't know what happened. Either I got offended or you got offended. We broke up. No, just kidding. Something like that. But we did do a podcast back in the day, and Dr. R.B. Maynard is a resident teacher every Sunday. Your Sunday school class at 9:30 a.m. It's by the fellowship hall, and you're all welcome to come every single Sunday. So.
Yes, that's right.
Yep. So come check it out. Dr. R.B. Maynard, I now turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, in my class, we're always verse by verse, and so we are in the book of Matthew. So I'm just going to kind of pick up where we were in Sunday school, or where we would be this coming Sunday. So this is in Matthew 24:3, and this section of Scripture is a little bit odd because he talks about the end times, but it mixes in a little bit with the actual end times that we know of in the book of Revelation, those kind of things. But also he's talking about the destruction of the temple. And so the disciples, are asking questions. He's been all over the Pharisees to criticizing them. It's when he calls them the brood of vipers and those kind of things. So he's talking about all these things, but the confusing part of it is some of it is actually the end times. Other things that he's talking about just has to do with what's going to happen before the destruction of the temple. And so they ask, it says, as Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And so our mind immediately goes to the actual end times, after the book of Revelation, after his second coming, all of the rapture, all of those kind of things. But it's not necessarily about that. He's talking really more about what's happening before the destruction of the temple, or as the destruction is going to happen. So it's really a prophetic word, and they're just asking questions. They're curious, why is this happening? When is this happening? And there's nothing wrong with that. I think the Lord is very understanding of our questions. There are some things that are unanswerable. There are things that we shouldn't argue about, but I think we have something built inside of us that, we're looking for perfection at some point in our lives. And that perfection's only going to come in the end.
And I guess I've been around since 1979, but I think every generation too could probably point to something in their time that would set an alarm off to be like, Jesus is coming back right now. Like I think before my time, atomic bombs, World War I, II, III, right? I'm sure there's something for every generation that points to this is the time. And sure enough, when we read the New Testament, they were living like that, like Jesus is coming back. So
well, no, I was saved, and I've been in the church my whole life, so it's hard to actually point to a definite time for me. I feel like I just kind of lived it out or whatever. But anyway, I remember a service where they were talking about aliens and flying saucers, and I really think I got almost scared into salvation. And so you're right. The generations and how things have been taught. It does have a big impact on us. But so anyway, they're just asking questions. Jesus answered, and I love that about him because, there's so many times we think, well, Jesus, if we ask a dumb question, he just writes us off like, well, you're stupid, or why are you asking that, or, those kind of things. But he answers their question. He says, watch out that no one deceives you. And so it's like, well, wait a minute, that's not what we ask, but what he's saying is you're going to ask that question a lot, but there's people out there that are deceptive. There's people out there who are claiming to be the prophet, claiming to be Messiah, whatever it may be. And so you have to be careful, and especially with prophetic type things and people trying to explain those things. I've heard many guys teach in that area of prophecy, and they just come up with something so definite, that this is what it means and this is what's going to happen. There are some things like that, but there are some things we just don't know. And so we have to be careful. And he tells them that right up front, be careful.
It is tough to toe the line between what I would say deception and dogmatism. Dogmatism is like I was saying that word to someone. What does that mean? It means think you're so right that you're just absolutely dogmatic in that point. So we don't want to quite get there because no one knows the end times to its truest, unfolding. Right. But then as well, we don't want to walk in deception either, where we're like, let's just be oblivious and we'll just, whenever it happens, it happens. There is a wisdom, a discernment, and an expectation and a truth that we're seeking out until this time comes. Right.
And in your lifetime and mine, we've both seen, and I have some of it down here, but we've both seen those times where someone said, the rapture is going to happen on this day, or at this particular place. And
Y2K.
I wrote down, there's predictions in 1914, 1988, 1994, 2011, 2017, and I'm sure there's probably others, but those were some of the big ones where people really were falling for that.
I don't think it caught as much. Probably there's the African guy. I don't know if South Africa. He said Jesus would come back in September. Then he had to backtrack. Well, I really meant like 2 weeks from now. And then I don't know where he's at now. But
I don't know either. But
everyone is ministry.
But Proverbs 13:12 says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but when the desire comes, it is a tree of life." And so, we have a hope. Thank goodness. I've said it many times. If it wasn't for the hope that we have, I don't know how people live or how they live without any expectation that there's ever going to be something better, that they claim they don't believe or whatever. And so, and then verse 24:5 says, "For many will come in my name, claiming I am the Christ, and will deceive many." And so there's, again, a big long list of people who claim to be Christ himself, and many people who have fallen for that. Yeah. They thought this guy was just, and we may not even say it sometimes, but we still act like that because we put these guys up there like they are just the authority on everything, and they have such a following, and it's just amazing how people could get. And again, they're so dogmatic about it that they believe that that guy is as near to Christ as you could be, or that he is the Christ.
Right.
And so I we've been there in this church. We're not mentioning names or anything here, but we had a guy leave the church because you said you were Jesus.
Yeah.
And we all know that was not what was said. And anyway, we don't need to get into all that,
Right.
but he took that.
We're coming off summertime. I was tan, know.
Yeah, you look so Jewish. That's the thing.
Right.
But and I wrote down a couple of those too. David Koresh, 82 members and 25 children died in that siege or whatever you want to call it. That was a little different. He didn't order them to be poisoned or anything like that, but it came down to somebody started shooting, and then the fire started, and there's all that debate about did they start them in the compound or did the FBI? It was all a big.
Yeah.
But regardless of who started the fires and all of that, it was still a deception that people thought that he was Christ.
Wow.
Yeah.
We go about how do people fall for that, but they do. And we have to, I don't want to take away from what you're saying there in Matthew. I'm getting ready to preach out of 1st, 2nd, 3rd John later on this year. Mm-hmm. And one thing that caught my attention and why I was so interested in preaching on that was the spirit of the Antichrist. So it's not just like false Christ as like a person,
right?
But it's the spirit of that we have to be aware of too. Mm-hmm. So it's not just always this person that's like, hey, I'm Jesus. Right. It's the spirit of the Antichrist that wants to invade our church, our lives, etc.
Right. And it's always been there, but it's just so much more noticeable now with, all the AI and,
right.
The internet. You read through or look through things and it's like, is this real? Did this happen? Yeah. We can be deceived.
Yeah.
Pretty easy.
Right.
Really. So 24:8, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. And so, again, we read through the Bible, and man, it's full of war. We've always said if you think the Bible's boring, you just haven't read. When you talk about all the wars and things that have happened. And so it's, again, there's a little deception here because we use that scripture sometimes like, oh man, there's so much fighting going on in the world right now. It must be the end times. But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the wars and the things that are happening before the destruction of the temple. And you're going to see this come to pass. They actually said that, and again, we've read about all kinds of wars throughout the Bible, but they said really this was kind of a peaceful time. And so when he began to talk about that, then it looks more like, okay, something different is about to happen. Because they could have said, well, it's just like today. If people say, oh, wars and rumors of wars, well, I wouldn't think that was close to the end times because we have that.
Yeah.
My whole lifetime we've had that.
Yeah. Yep.
Somebody's getting ready to invade somebody somewhere. So it's nothing really new there, but it says in verse 7, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. And it's that same thing that we've used this as an end times. Oh, there's more earthquakes, and there's earthquakes in all kinds of places. And, oh, man, I read about a famine, somewhere the other day. But we know that those things have always been there. Now, will they increase? I think what he's talking about here, yes. And we won't go through all of these. I just wrote down a couple of things. We have Russia and Ukraine right now. And then Iran and Iraq, and we can just go down the list of people who are that we're not fighting even necessarily, but that are fighting each other somewhere. And so we have that. But I wrote down just a few things. in Sudan, which is the number one place for famine and starvation, it says there's 26.6 million suffering from extreme hunger.
Wow.
So, it's not in Yemen, 17 million, Afghanistan, 14 million, South Sudan, 7 million, Ethiopia, 20 million, the Congo, 28 million. I mean, there is, if we want to look at, oh man, it's the end times, there's famines and starvation, and, well, yes, it's going on. But he was still more talking about not the end times, but this time coming of the destruction of the temple. And I thought, isn't it amazing how that, we in our modern, we don't have the temple per se. Now, I mean, we all have our local churches and those kind of things, but we don't have a temple. But he equates that, the importance of the temple there, to the second coming of Christ in the end. There's so many similarities between what he's talking about with the destruction of the temple and the destruction of, the end times of the destruction of the end of the world. And there's so many similarities, and it's like the temple was so important that he uses some of the same language to talk about end times and the destruction of the temple. And so, and again, the issue with earthquakes, people say, oh, there's earthquake. Oh, they had an earthquake at so-and-so, and they've never had an earthquake there. But when you look at that, and I try to look at several different sites, because you know how things can be, you can make it look however you want it to look. And so, but they talk about better technology, so we have more technology to know about earthquakes. So it may not be that there's any more, just easier to recognize with the equipment. And then they talked about fracking, which has caused some of that. But they say there's about 15 earthquakes a year since 1900. And that has stayed pretty consistent, about 15. Now I think they said that's a 7 or greater. So yes, there's a lot of small earthquakes. We have earthquakes here sometimes. I mean, sometimes people say, well, I felt that, and other times it's not. But
I was youth pastor in California, and we had several earthquakes like during the night that and I never felt it, and I was so disappointed because I wanted to have the experience, but never did. So
we lived in California when I was in the 8th grade, and we had one while I was there, and I was in bed, and it was strong enough that the bed was shaking back and forth. Wow. I mean, it shook me awake.
Okay.
Wow. So anyway, all of these things, and it says in verse 8, all these are the beginning of birth pains. And again, we talk about that with the end times, but he's talking more about the destruction of the temple again. And so the King James says the beginning of sorrows. And so these things that he's talking about here are only the beginning of what's going to happen, whether you're using this in the sense of the temple or whether you're using it in the sense of the end times. It's like this is only the beginning. In other words, things are going to get much worse. If you think it's bad, it's going to be much worse when it actually all comes about. And so, what is the beginning? The deception, the wars, the rumors of wars, the nations against nations, and there's still nobody that can predict any of that as far as when. He said, you're going to see this destruction in your lifetime. Well, that still didn't, depends on how old you are. You're going to see them in your lifetime. Well, does that mean I got 50 more years to live or whatever? And within 70 years is when the destruction of the temple came. So all these things that he's talking about here, there's a 70-year time frame for them to look around and say, we have more earthquakes, we have more wars, we have more. They could see those things coming towards the destruction of the temple. So I don't know how far you want to go here.
Yeah, that's a good stopping point. Man, great stuff. Listen, guys, you can Here, Dr. R.B. Maynard, every Sunday for free. There's like no ticket price. Think of how much you pay to get into Silver Dollar City, whatever it is, and you can come to church for free every Sunday, 9:30, get that teaching. So we appreciate that very much, Dr. R.B. Maynard, the advice, the wisdom, the godliness you bring each and every Sunday, the Bible, the Word of God. And so thank you guys for joining us today for this particular segment. And we encourage you guys, check out Pastor Rachel's segment, My Little Word I'm going to share with you, GP Kids. Stay safe, stay warm, all those good kind of things. Don't forget, stay connected with us, gracepointeag.org, the Facebook page, and then as well, come to the Dream Conference. All right, we'll talk to you guys next time.